Welcome to Third Take. My name's Damien Lewarden. I've been in games and media criticism for over 10 years now. I reached out to the other members of the team, and I've got 3 of them here. So, I think I'll pass it over to Mike now to introduce himself.
Cool. Hey everyone, my name is Michael Cripe. I've been writing alongside Damien specifically, actually, for I think 4 years, since late 2017. So I've been writing about games and for around that long, and I'm just happy to be a part of this project. As soon as Damien reached out to us, I was excited to get going. So yeah, episode 1, I'm excited.
How about you, Rebecca?
Hi there, I'm Rebecca Hills Duty. I prefer the pronouns they and them for your to keep you informed about these things. I've been writing about games for about 4 years, but I've also been doing podcasts since 2011 and doing a live show with Radio Sega since 2016. So I know a lot about games and technology because I am an enormous nerd.
And Mitchell?
And I'm Mitchell. My pronouns are he, him, or they, them, whichever makes you more comfortable. I've also been in the writing for 4 or 5 years, since about the same time I started full-time work, which is tricky. And I also am really excited to be part of this because I've never been on an audio show before. It's fun because I have a lot of useless video game knowledge in my head and a lot of approximate video game knowledge that I'd like to forge into something actually useful.
Alright, well, hopefully we can make that part happen at least. For this episode, I guess it was a bit of an introduction to the team in diving a bit deeper than just saying who we are by exploring the media products that we really enjoyed this year. And so when we started talking about it, I was always very emphatic about saying, our favourites of the year versus the best of the year or game of the year or whatever you want to call it. So I thought before we actually dive into that, we unpack that a little bit. So what do you all think is the value of saying favourites versus best?
Personally, I think because media, like video games and media in general, have such a subjective thing. For example, I'm not a huge fan of first-person shooters, but I know a lot of people really love them. So, even if a first-person shooter was really, really good, objectively, I still wouldn't enjoy it. So the thing that I have enjoyed this year is not the same thing that somebody else is going to enjoy because my personal requirements are different.
Yeah. Mike, Mitchell, did either of you have anything you want to input?
I agree with Rebecca. It's everybody has different preferences. I think I talk about it all the time, but my favorite game ever is Super Mario Sunshine, and that's a game with a lot of flaws. I would never call it the best game ever, not in a million years, but for me, it's my favorite game for a lot of different reasons, and I know other people have games they like that maybe others don't. So, and I think also just in the industry, we all get really wrapped up in this whole what was the best game of X year or whatever. So I think it's something talking about your favorite game or your favorite movie or whatever isn't as touched upon, really. I don't see as many people talking about that specifically.
I agree with Mike and Rebecca, but I like talking about faves versus game of the year or movie of the year for a very basic, pragmatic reason, and that is 3 or 4 months of the year I'm completely wiped out by seasonal affective depression, so I don't tend to have a huge relationship with the best games of the year because I miss out a lot of them. It tends to just be, I made it through maybe 5 or 6 games in total, and I like this one the most. I couldn't call it the best because for all I know, 3 years from now, I'll play something else, and it's far and away the best game of 2021, and so, opinions change.
And I think that's, like, you also touched on one of the reasons that I wanted to discuss on it, because one of the big things about media criticism, websites like IGN or Kotaku, The Escapist, blah, 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 is they focus very much on the now. But I think a lot of people, it's like, yeah, a lot of people do like to keep up with the zeitgeist and keep up with the trends, but we also watch a lot of older movies, we play a lot of older games, we read older books, so it's like our favorites or what we experience as the best of the year isn't necessarily from that year.
Yeah,
I think that's something we're gonna. Sorry, you go.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. It's kind of hard with the timing and delay and everything. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. That was probably the thing I was most excited about when you sort of gave us the prompt of talking about our favorites versus best, because there were a lot of games I played this year that I liked. But when I thought about like the best one, it wasn't particularly interesting to me. But one game I did play this year, I is very old. It's decades old. But it was my favorite experience from this year. So I'm super excited to talk about that for sure.
Yeah. And the other thing for me is when we talk about Game of the Year, one of the things that I tend to think of is it isn't defined by the best of the year, but the product that best represents the year. And when it comes to 2021, I don't think there's any competition but that it's Star Citizen. Because it's this project that has this huge amount of promise, huge amount of money behind it, and yet every time I hear about it, people are complaining that it's not coming together, that it's not working as a game, and I think that really sums up in 2021.
Of course.
Anyway, Mitchell, I thought we'd start with you talking about what was your favourite game of the year.
Well, it's almost by default. I've spent something like 50 hours in this one. Returnal. There are several games I've enjoyed about as much, but none that I've really had the presence of mind and ability to concentrate and focus on, which is odd, because this is a third-person shooter roguelite, which are all things that I'm not particularly invested in, particularly with roguelites. I tend to think, it's from an intellectual perspective, a roguelite is wonderful. It's this enormous game that's actually quite player friendly in the sense that there's so much content to play. You can spend either in Australia something like $100 on a full price game, or in cases with indie games can be as little as $20, and get weeks and weeks of entertainment. I think that's fantastic. But on the other hand, the fact that it takes you so long and it's so repetitive does bump up against my own personal ideas of how games should respect our time. And that's certainly a tension that stuck with me on Returnal, and I think it's a testament to how good I think Returnal is that I was able to overcome some of that concern. It's this science fiction, cosmic horror, spooky and mysterious Greek mythology mix that has elements of games I've liked in the past, like Alan Wake and Control, and also plays like one of Housemarque's previous arcade games. I should say Returnal is from Housemarque, and I think if you've been following the news, then you know that Housemarque has been around for many decades, but they recently got bought by Sony, and Returnal was almost their audition to be a Sony first party, which, I don't know if I agree with that either, but if a certain kind of game, the big cinematic third-person action game, is the sort of thing Sony wants to make, then Returnal is certainly one of those. But it's also very special because it fits in the same vein as other Housemarque arcade games. It's got bullet hell elements. It's got a huge variety of gameplay sort of actions you can take based on the different weapons you pick up and the different mutators that happen. In this case, the mutators are parasites that latch onto your character and give you a buff and a debuff. So it's great for fans of arcade games like Housemarque's previous Super Stardust or anything along those lines, bullet hell wise. But it also combines that with the third-person shooter, which, like I said, I'm not a huge fan of that style of game, but I love it here because it's so polished. It's this really detail-oriented science fiction, Bloodborne almost horror vibes, and the bosses are inspired by a painter who you might have seen around on the internet called Zdzisław Beksiński, and his very surreal, slightly body horror-ish, but also slightly brutalist almost designs. And it's wonderful. It's so difficult to recommend to everyone because, again, I've spent 50 hours on this game. It's not easy, and as an arcade-style roguelite experience, you have to run through levels again and again to collect new items, most of which you collect on one run and then go away, and only some of which give you permanent upgrades, which I guess is the same with most roguelites. But ultimately, I didn't mind that it was the same as most roguelites because it was just so entertaining, so much in my wheelhouse with the sci-fi horror vibes.
Do you think Returnal will get you... Are you more interested in roguelites now, like after the fact?
That's a great question, and yes, I'm actually going to play Hades after Returnal.
Yeah, that's a great pick.
Good choice. Good choice. Such a good game.
Hades.
Yeah, it sounds
Hades
sounds like
brilliant.
it could be a good one to follow with.
Have any of you played Returnal as well?
No, unfortunately not.
No, I have not. No,
Yeah, nor have
afraid
I.
not.
Can't get a PlayStation 5, so...
I got lucky. I happened to be on my phone the moment that the pre-orders went up, so I got a pre-order in at the exact second that they went up. So I'm very lucky.
I did an entire article about why I am not buying a PlayStation 5 until they have them in different colours.
That's true, and now they do.
Now they
There you
do.
go.
They've just announced it.
Now they do. Yeah, I want the purple one.
Oh,
The purple
good
one's
choice.
really good. Looks really great.
Purple is my favourite colour.
Yeah, so... Sorry, you
Sorry, just wanted to add one more thing. I just one thing I love about Returnal is it does kind of feel like Sony's first party lineup's getting a little stale. It has been for some time, just in terms of the offering. So I don't know. I want to play Returnal, but I also just want to support Sony funding more games like that because that gameplay centric sort of design, like it's super appealing to me, and it seemed like a lot of people latched onto Returnal, so I think they're going to do more things like that, and I'm super excited.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, really.
Yeah. I do agree with that. They've gotten really heavy with the whole cinematic, third-person-y, blockbustery, yeah, and they've kind of abandoned things like Tokyo Jungle recently. So yeah, I do think that it's hopefully a good direction for Sony going forward, or PlayStation going forward.
I
That
will
does
say
tend
there's-
to be. That does. Sorry.
There's a whiff of that. There's a whiff of the Marvel method in this, in that every new Marvel movie comes out, and it's not just a superhero movie. It's also a blah. It's also a martial arts action movie, or it's also a sci-fi epic, and there's a whiff of that with this because Returnal is also a cinematic third-person action game. It's just that you can skip the cinematics without worrying too much about whether you understand what's going on, because, I don't know, I think you could watch them all and still not understand what's going on, because it's not important. It's the gameplay, as you say, that's important.
The Metal Gear Solid approach.
It's like they're smuggling the traditional arcade action and gameplay focus in with these highly polished cutscenes and epic cinematic story.
Like they threw
You
all
tend
that
to get that sort of thing quite a lot with the start of a new console generation, though, because they want to show off what the new hardware can do. So you do tend to get, like, it tends to be front loaded with the kind of very cinematic experiences more than games.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking when you mentioned, I was thinking like Rise, Son of Rome, and like The Order from the PlayStation 4, Xbox One generation. That definitely.
So you tend to have the more experimental stuff later.
Astrobot.
Yes,
Yes.
Astrobot's
That's
brilliant.
incredible.
I've actually I wrote one of the very early reviews for that. I think part of my quote from my review was on some of the advertising material.
Oh, that's cool.
Oh, that's wonderful.
That was a bit of a boost to my ego. I was like, very nice.
All right, another boost. What was your favorite of the year?
Persona 5 Strikers. I was initially worried about that game because I love Persona 5 so much. Anyone who follows me on social media will know that my profile picture for the past kind of year and a half has been some Morgana in some guise. And I love the characters and the story from Persona 5 so much. And I really wanted to spend more time with those characters and continue their journey, their story. But because I knew that Strikers was kind of... there was like... Who am I thinking of? Bandai Namco?
You mean Koei Tecmo, Dynasty Warriors?
Yeah, Koei Tecmo, sorry. It's another double-barreled Japanese company.
Mergers everywhere.
Yes. And it was like, oh, there's some Dynasty Warrior stuff in here, and I find I know a lot of people love it, but I find Dynasty Warriors so tedious because it's just ploughing through enemies over and over and over again. It's like, all right, I get the general idea.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
What it actually turned out to be was kind of, instead of being what I feared it was, which was Dynasty Warriors with a Persona 5 coat of paint, it was Persona 5 just like an action RPG. In terms of feeling, it felt more like something like Kingdom Hearts.
Oh, wow.
And with, those the stealth elements and the really interesting story and villains and those characters that I love so much. So I got really absorbed in it really quickly. And the kind of sense of style was there as well. And it was really absorbing, and I enjoyed it way more than I expected to. And I finished it really quickly. Whoops. And the new characters they introduced, I found really interesting. Because, usually I don't like it when they randomly introduce new characters, but these ones I've caught fun.
So you mentioned a couple of times there that you really liked the story and the characters from Persona 5 and how that carried into Strikers. What was it about that was so interesting to you?
And a lot of the story from Persona 5 was very specific to Japan and the way that their culture expects you to kind of not conform exactly, but bow to expectation. And there's that phrase that tends to show up quite a lot in Japanese media, that it can't be helped. This is the way the world is, you have to accept it, and trying to fight back against it will just wind up getting you kind of crushed underfoot. And that's where the characters are at the start of the game. And each one is being kind of crushed by the kind of weight of these expectations of what they are supposed to be. But they subvert that, and they actually do find a way to fight back against this system and change things. And I think that's why so many people, me included, kind of found resonance in that, is that they wanted to hold people accountable who had done things that were wrong, and change their position in society from someone powerless to someone who has a degree of power and influence without being corrupted by that power and influence. That's what I found really interesting.
And is that so? That's aspects of Persona 5 that have carried over into Strikers?
Yes, because one of the key themes is people who... The villains in the villains in mainline Persona 5 are completely irredeemable, awful, terrible people for the most part. With a couple of exceptions, especially if you're playing Royal. The villains in Strikers are people who were in positions where they were powerless, but they then got power and were corrupted by it, and they lost their way and had to be kind of guided back to the right path. It was made them a lot more complex, and so the usual method of, we just forcibly reform you wouldn't work in this instance, because they're not at heart awful people, they have just been twisted by circumstance.
It sounds like a great concept for a sequel to a high school game, because it's kind of like with a lot of these young adult book series where the best ones age up with the audience.
Yeah. It felt a bit like a kind of, not quite a graduation, but from high school to university.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. And it sounds like, to a degree, also subverting the expectations or the norms that were set in the original by changing the villains in that way.
Yeah. So not everybody that does harm to you is going to be an irredeemably awful person. Sometimes they have just been put on the wrong path by the circumstances they were in, and they can't see a way out. And that's the case of quite a lot of the villains in Strikers. It's that this is the only way that they can think of to make things better, and that puts them on a very dark road. And the fact that they can find something redeemable in these people, and even make friends with them on a few occasions, is actually really interesting to me, especially in contrast to the villains from the main game.
No, wow. I mean, I burnt out on RPG combat halfway through Persona 4. So you're really making me think I should skip to Persona 5. But I know once I'm recovered, I'll probably go back and finish Persona 4 first. Persona
4 is good, but the proper Persona 5 is kind of a more refined version of 4. In that it's a lot more integrated. The activities you do outside of I'll call them dungeons, actually reflect back on the stuff you do in dungeons, and vice versa to a certain extent. Which Persona 4 has them very sharply divided.
So it sounds like Persona 5 Strikers is more or less a proper sequel. It's just it doesn't play the same.
Yeah. Yep.
Interesting.
Damien?
Yes, so my favourite of the year was Essays on Empathy by Deconstruct Team. And I think anyone who knows me probably could have seen that coming from a mile away, because the team's previous game, the Red Strings Club, was, I think, one of very few games that at Only SPI gave our highest possible accolade. So yeah, when I got the PR email that they'd be collating a bunch of their older games, or smaller games rather, into a collection and releasing it with making of commentary, I was like, right, I am so there. And it did not disappoint. So there's 10 games in the collection, 9 old ones, 1 brand new one. And I think the thing that really struck me with it was that the title's perfect. It's like Essays on Empathy. And the way the games are is they're very simple. There's one called the Bookshelf Limbo, where all you do is your character's in a library and you look at these books. You look at the covers, you look at the back covers, read the blurb, read the reviews, and then at the end of it you have to pick one that you're going to give to your father. Yeah, and I just found it so interesting because it's this insight into the situations that exist in everyday life that we kind of take for granted, and the way these stories play out is they really make you sit and reflect on your place and your thinking and who you are as a person. And for me, it was just like, I love it. It's brilliant.
So it sounds a lot like. Forgive me, I didn't play Red Strings Club, so I'm not sure if this is what their MO is, but it sounds a lot like this is sort of poetry first, interactive poetry.
In a lot of ways, yeah. There's another game in the collection, and this one's probably my favorite. It's called Behind Every Great One, and it is basically about you take the role of a woman in an abusive relationship.
Wow.
Oof.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's heavy, and I think that's just the beauty of the collection and the beauty of everything that Deconstructing puts out. I can't recommend it highly enough.
Is Essays on Empathy, is that only available on PC, I'm assuming?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, over to Mike. You mentioned before that your favorite game of the year was decades old. So what was it?
Yeah, so I'm kind of embarrassed to say that this year, not even really this year, last month was the first time I ever played and beat Super Metroid. Um, I'd started it many times before. I played and beat Metroid Fusion when I was in middle school, but I had just never gone back to revisit the series until um, Metroid Samus Returns on 3DS. And yeah, they have the SNES, Nintendo Switch Online offerings, as I'm sure many of you are aware. And and there's so many fantastic games on that collection, and I always dip into a lot of them, and I like play some with my girlfriend. They got great co-op games on there, but um, I took a flight recently, and I was like, I'm gonna start Super Metroid. I'm gonna really start it and get into it. And I think what deterred me for so long was just like sort of reacclimating myself in my brain to this what I thought at the time, I guess, was this sort of like arcade, not archaic controls, but like it just felt like the game was sluggish to me. Like getting into it and starting it, like Samus just feels sort of clunky to control, and she's slow and like lumbering. um, and now I realize that it's kind of the point, because as you go through, obviously it's Super Metroid. You get all sorts of different abilities and weapons and things that make you feel like an unstoppable being by the not even really by the end. I think by like 3/4 of the way through, I was just like, I can't die. I was like, this. I just feel incredible. I feel like a Terminator, basically. Um, but yeah, I had never played and beaten it until last month, and I am very happy to say that I did, because it is just an absolute masterpiece. It's a masterpiece, and if anyone has a Nintendo Switch Online, I highly recommend you download that collection and visit some of those titles, specifically Super Metroid, and just get past the first maybe hour of it. And just give it an honest shake, and I think you'll stick with it to the end. This some highlights, I guess, if I could point out some things, are just the fact that it makes you feel so isolated and claustrophobic, despite the fact that it's an entirely 2D experience. I think is really just a testament to its design.
It's
It
the
made me.
music as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The music. it's weird because it's not, well, a lot of it isn't like traditionally like catchy or anything, but there's a lot of like really atmospheric tunes in there and different themes for different areas. So you know where you're at no matter where you're at on the planet. It's just, I don't have anything negative to say about it. It's just a brilliant experience through and through. Yeah, the music absolutely deserves a shout out. I just there's a lot of similarities, but it reminded me a lot of Dead Space, which obviously came far after Super Metroid did. But Dead Space is one of my favorite games of all time, and sort of getting to relive the feelings Dead Space made me feel of, again, like that claustrophobic sort of feeling, like that was really special for me, to get that again. Obviously Super Metroid is a little bit different, but it's not exactly not a scary game either. Sometimes you get into a new area that throws something at you you've not seen before, and you go from feeling powerful to not quite as strong in the face of new monsters and obstacles and like lava rooms and things like that. So yeah, it's it's been added to the small list of games, I think, where I wish I could forget everything I know about it now and go back and revisit it totally fresh, because it was really magical. It's a great game. Obviously, I know I'm super late to the party on that, but yeah, I think that kind of summarizes my thoughts.
So I've never played Super Metroid.
I'm not alone.
Yeah, no.
I think
never
maybe
had a
we might
Nintendo.
outnumber you, because I also have started it several times, but I'm still at that hour mark you mentioned.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well maybe
I've played the original and Super Metroid.
Okay. I was gonna say
I back in ye olden days as well.
right. I was gonna say, I'm pretty surprised. I thought that was just one of those things where everybody's played it, and I was not. I had not yet. So I've got friends here. That's good.
We're all friends.
Yeah.
Well, I think that it's fair to admit, like, in my position, I was not really set up to be able to afford all the consoles, so I never had a Super Nintendo.
Yeah, I was in the same issue. Like when I was a kid, I had an Atari, I think the 2600, if I remember correctly, and Sega Mega System, and then
Sega! It says it when you boot up the game! Sega! Oh my god!
Sega. Sorry.
Sega.
Yeah, but then nothing until I bought a PlayStation 3. So
Oh, wow.
I missed a lot.
I'm an only child, so I was spoilt to death. I'm not going to tell you how many consoles I've had on the years. We'd be here for ages.
Fair enough.
I actually started, my first console was a Super Nintendo, but yeah, somehow I completely missed this one. I'm sure if I played it when I was a kid, I would have played it and seen it through, because I remember playing Super Mario Brothers and or Super Mario World, and Super Mario Kart, all kinds of games, but somehow never touched Super Metroid. So I'm glad to sort of get that nostalgic Super Nintendo feeling as well from this whole thing.
All right. So let's move on. So obviously we all have a background in gaming, but Third Take is sort of we want to be a bit broader than that. We want to be across all media and use it to reflect on what's happening in the world. So, Rebecca, do you want to start us off with what was your favourite screen experience of the year, whether that's film or TV?
For obvious reasons, I've not gone out to see many films this year. But I was looking for something to put on in the background while I was working on... I make jewellery and things. And I wanted something on in the background while I was doing that. And on Amazon Prime Video, I found Leverage, which I'd never seen before. And I figured, well, it's just going to be on in the background, I might as well give it a go. And what I found was that I actually really, really enjoyed it. And I didn't expect to enjoy it anything like as much as I did. But it's basically like the A-Team for the 21st century.
Oh my.
And because what they do is the same thing that shows like the A-Team and Knight Rider to a certain extent is, there's always like a corrupt cop or a businessman who's screwing people over or that sort of thing. And they construct this really elaborate plan to take these guys down and have them face the consequences. And considering what's been going on in politics, certainly in the UK and America, it feels so satisfying. And you just think, I really wish that these guys were real.
Oh, sounds good.
It does.
And there's so many like geek references because the guys who write it are massive nerds. So there's like Doctor Who references and Star Trek references and all sorts of things and bits and pieces in it. Because there's this guy who's a hacker, and so he makes all of their like fake identities and everything. And at one point, it's like Tom and Sarah Jane Baker, two of their identities that I just sat there and giggled. I was also reading some of the one of the guys who was the kind of showrunner talking about when he was doing the research, and it's like he has to tone some of it down from real life.
Oh.
Because if he put some of the stuff that they actually did in real life on the screen, people would go, no, that's not, no. Yeah, reality is unrealistic.
Yeah, the whole reality is stranger than fiction thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it's just such good fun. And I kept being distracted from what I was actually trying to do while I was watching it. It's like, ooh.
So,
What was I doing? Where was I? Oh, the beads have gone everywhere. Damn.
Those are the best movies and shows when you don't mean to you just starting it because you need something on in the background. All of a sudden, you find yourself like totally like engrossed in it. Those are my favorite.
I think it's a testament to the power of the shows themselves as well that, you just put them on and suddenly it's like, ooh, butterfly. So, that was the original run that you were talking about, right, Rebecca?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, because they've just revived it, haven't they?
Yeah, there's a new one. I've not watched that yet because I've not got to the end of the original series yet. But yeah, one of the nice thing about it is that there's one of the characters is, well, first of all, female, and they're definitely autistic coded, and those things together are kind of rare in media.
Yeah.
And nobody in the team kind of treats her as if she was, a machine or, you know how it's like,
Unfortunately,
she's not dehumanized.
Yes.
Yes, and she's not dehumanized anyway. People just go, oh, that's just her doing a thing. That's fine. And it is completely accepted by us. Like, they make accommodations for her. And it's nice that is a thing. And it shouldn't be unusual, but it is.
It definitely is. And that actually, I think that's a good segue into my favourite show of the year, which was Wakefield, which I don't know if it's available in the UK, but I do know it's been sold in the US. And so it centres around a mental health facility in the Blue Mountains. And the main character is an Indian Australian named Nikhil. And it's just sort of, he's the head nurse there. And the show explores like how he deals with the situations in the facility. So there are people there with, psychosis or autism, depression, just a range of mental illnesses. And at the same time as he's dealing with it, he's going through his own personal issues that are raising like past trauma for him. And
right.
Yeah, and for me, it's like, so, yeah, so I have mental health issues. I have depression. I have anxiety. And so for me, it's like seeing that represented on screen and seeing it done in such a respectful and relatable way was something that I just found so brilliant to watch.
Yeah, it's refreshing, the
Yeah,
idea of mentally ill people actually being treated as if they were human.
yeah, and and like one of the big things about Wakefield is that the writer, or I think the writer director actually spent some, like, was committed to a mental health facility, I should say, rather, years ago. So it's just been a process of her writing it and bringing it to life.
And is it how would you say it's structured? Because you said it's a series, but it's not.
Mini-series, according to the what I've just googled.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
well,
I love
8 episodes.
miniseries.
So yeah,
That's
well,
good.
I mean, because it was on ABC, and a lot of what ABC produces is miniseries, like 6 episodes, 8 episodes. I think the longest they normally do for their flagship dramas is like 10 episodes. So a lot of their stuff ends up feeling like miniseries. And with Wakefield, it's like each episode sort of focuses on a different patient within Nikhil's journey.
It is a bit weird, though, considering Wakefield is a town that's not that far from me over here.
Not that Wakefield.
Yeah, not that one. Right,
No.
okay.
Is the place in the show called Wakefield, or is it named after something else?
So it's Wakefield Psychiatric Hospital, I think. Over to you, Mike.
Yeah, so I've seen a lot of movies this year. I try to go to the theaters at least once a weekend. So I had a hard time picking one. I almost chose Pig, starring Nicolas Cage. I thought that was a really great film. But I actually decided to go with Last Night in Soho, Edgar Wright's newest movie. If anyone listening isn't familiar with Edgar Wright, you've probably seen one of his movies. His most recent before Last Night in Soho was Baby Driver. He also did Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz.
Great movie.
Yeah, I love all of those movies. I think he's really brilliant. And it's funny because I don't think Last Night in Soho is my favorite movie of his. Maybe not even in the sort of like top half of my favorite movies of his, but it was definitely my favorite movie this year. And it's really funny for me to talk about, because I feel like when I want to talk about Last Night in Soho, I almost feel like I have more problems than things I liked, but I always think of it fondly. Like I'm trying to think of the way I want to say this. It's a movie that's really stuck in my head. The imagery, the colors, just the different shots. There's one shot actually that's my background right now. It's kind of hard to explain, but it's just a very visually gripping movie. Have you guys seen Last Night in Soho? I want to know if I should get into spoilers or not, or something like that.
I saw it.
You saw it. My partner and I are actually planning to see it tonight.
Okay,
Oh.
cool.
Yeah,
Wow.
but we'll see how that goes.
I definitely won't spoil it then, just in case. Rebecca, have you seen it?
I have not.
Okay. So I guess just sort of based on what's shown in the trailers then. Last Night in Soho follows a girl who moves to sort of the big city, and she is an aspiring fashion designer, and essentially when she goes to sleep at night, she finds herself sort of transported back, living life through the eyes of another girl, living in the 60s or 70s. I can't remember. And it's a horror movie. So it kind of unfolds from there. A lot of that stuff is explained in the first half hour, 45 minutes of the movie. But yeah, I won't get into what I disliked about the movie. And there is quite a bit that can be spoiled. So I guess I'll just say, I'll just sort of reiterate what I already said. I think it's visually gripping. I have some problems with its story and how things are explained, but for the most part, when I walked into the theater, the 2 times I saw it, I came away just with a smile on my face, just feeling like they really accomplished. Edgar Wright really accomplished the mission he was trying to succeed in with the film. I, I want to talk about it. I hope everybody sees it. It's really great. It's not fantastic. Again, I think Baby Driver might be my favorite movie of his, but I still liked it quite a bit.
Sounds like it'll come up again.
I hope so. I hope it does.
All right, Mitchell.
Well, I picked for this the French Dispatch, the latest movie by Wes Anderson, and I don't know, if you know me, you know I love Wes Anderson movies, but if you know Wes Anderson, you know he's very divisive. I'd say about 50% of the people I know despise these movies, which always causes me a bit of psychological damage because I think his movies are wonderful and I can't imagine disliking them. This one I was doomed to like, however. The French Dispatch is also an anthology movie, so it's a movie by Wes Anderson and it's an anthology movie, and those are two things that I love. Anthologies, I guess I probably started enjoying anthologies in the early 2000s when I was reading science fiction short stories, but when I did an anthology of my own, I sort of became enamored with the intricacies of structuring a short story anthology, and this movie might be the best anthology movie I've seen because Wes Anderson's approach, if you don't know, it's very particular. He has very particular interests. It's highly stylized. It's got a lot of humor and sort of bizarre cultural references, and each of his movies already feels like a little diorama that you can sort of look at the little models inside of and play around with. So that style is very well set up for an anthology, and this movie has 3, I guess, 40-ish minute long storylines, maybe half an hour each since there's some in-between bits. It's meant to mimic the experience of reading a magazine. In this case, I think I don't have the cultural background for this, but I believe it is a tribute to the New Yorker and its style of article writing. But even if you don't have that background like I don't, it's still pretty obvious what it's going for, and the overarching story of the movie is that the French Dispatch is the sort of foreign detachment of this newspaper in Kansas, set up by a wealthy man who happened to be in France and wanted to stay there. So it's this sort of odd relic of a time in the 70s when this kind of magazine writing was really big, and if you've ever found an issue of a magazine that you're just like, I don't know why, but I love these stories, you know, the way that the writers have been selected to write on this specific magazine, and the subjects that they have chosen are so idiosyncratic. That's the vibe that the movie is going for, and I guess I don't want to give away what each of the stories is about, because if you do love this sort of thing, it's worth going in without knowing too much.
I'm not a big Wes Anderson fan, but the movies I have seen, I do like. And it was really important for me to go into the French Dispatch blind as well. I think I saw maybe half of one trailer because I try not to pay attention to those when I go into movies, mainly because I don't want things spoiled, but also because I see those same trailers every single weekend. But yeah, you're describing Wes Anderson films as little dioramas that you sort of get to peer into and see them moving. Like that's a really great way to describe it. French Dispatch was thoroughly entertaining. Really great pick. I think it's a great movie.
It's another one that I'm planning to see, but it's not in the local cinema yet. So,
oh, that's too bad.
Maybe next year.
Yeah.
All right, we'll wrap up our last section quite quickly. We'll have a minute each, I think. So we'll finish
Speed
off
round.
with... Sorry?
Speed round.
Yeah, basically.
Speed round.
So, Print. Mike, we'll start with you.
That's probably for the best. So hopefully through third take, you guys can sort of grow with me on this, because I'm not much of a reader, but it's something I want to get more into. But one book I have read at least partially this year is Ask Iwata, Words of Wisdom from Satoru Iwata, Nintendo's president. Those of you familiar, Satoru Iwata passed away. Gosh, I'm not even sure how many years ago at this
2015,
point.
I think.
Yeah, gosh,
Wow.
It's long ago. Feels like it was just yesterday. But really, just word from around the industry and videos and interviews and people who've met him have always been very positive. He's always seemed to be a very kind person, and this book sort of allows you to sort of peer into his life and get a handle on what kind of person he was and how he impacted the industry. And I guess if I wanted to say one thing I like about the book so far, is it's not just insightful for those of you interested in games and things like that, but it's I don't know, it's a bit of positivity that I think I really needed, and I think we all need in such a bleak last 2 years. So yeah, I think it's really great so far, and I will be finishing it eventually.
Cool. Over to you, Rebecca.
There was a Kickstarter campaign for what's described as a gaming journal rather than a magazine called Lock On. And I recently received my copy of Volume 2. I missed out on Volume 1, unfortunately. But it's such an insightful, beautiful thing. I mean, it's not just the words. The art in there is absolutely gorgeous. There's some absolutely stunning art. If you look up Lock On, I think the campaign's on Kickstarter, but there's also, I think you can order them on the Lost in Cult website now, and it's so beautiful. They've even got articles about things like the Nier series and Drakengard and how they fit together and the effects that they have, and they go into like a lot of detail on things like Jak and Daxter, and very soon they're going to be having a Kickstarter for a Volume 3, and I'm absolutely fascinated to keep up with these because they're so very beautiful and they're so nicely printed, and with absolutely gorgeous art and really insightful articles. I highly recommend.
You have to look into it.
That sounds exciting.
It does. Over to you, Mitchell.
My book for this year, despite having bought the book maybe 10 years ago, you'll probably come to learn this, but I have pretty bad attention span problems and will buy books and not read them for going on 10 years. And I loved to finally finish it because China Mieville, his book is The City in the City. China Mieville's style is really close to my mind, you might say. And this book, The City in the City, it's not overtly speculative in the sense it's not about a science fictional technology, but it is speculative in a social sense because it's about two cities that are separate cities but exist in the same location. And in case that sounds a little heady, it's because it is. but it's heady in the same sense that something like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is. Because in my mind, it's a supposition. It's, what if this thing that we think of in the world around us was like a physical place? So rather than being an allegory for any specific city or an allegory for social problems broadly, it is a supposition of, what if we could describe the problems we have with cities physically? What if we could say, like, actually, this is two completely separate cities, and from birth we are culturated to block out the other city, even though it is literally next door. And I just thought that this I can't go into it too deep because we don't have too much time left, but the book goes into all the suppositions you might imagine from that premise. And he, as a hard left writer, I think China Mieville really gets it. I think he really, in the case of this book, The City in the City, opened up all kinds of great concepts that you could use the book to sort of describe real world problems, and how the way we look at the world around us is defined politically. So that's why I love the book. It just had so much to chew on.
Yeah, I actually just picked it up last week after you suggested it, and yeah, I'm about halfway through it at the moment, really loving it, because of everything you've just said. But for me, my favourite of the year was a book called The End of Men by Christina Sweeney Baird, and it was a bit of a toss-up coming to that one because I also really loved Kazuo Ishiguro's Clara and the Sun, but The End of Men won out for me because it's so timely. She started writing it in, I think, 2018, and it's about a viral pandemic that sweeps the world and kills 90% of all men, which, I mean...
So, like the comic?
Like Y the Last Man, you mean?
Like Y the Last Man, wow.
Yeah. But yeah, so it really delves into, like, the society that rises in its place, and how different people try to navigate the changing world. And I just think it's so timely, and I think the idea of killing 90% of all men is really not a bad idea.
Oh, okay. that was a big deal.
Yeah, you know,
Well,
and on a note. Yes, so we'll just end. Is there anything that you guys want to plug?
follow me on Twitter where I'm at Blazing Skies. I also recommend going to radiosega.net because we have, coming up this weekend, our Winterfest event, so that'll be awesome.
You can follow me on Twitter if you like, at Polygon Native, all one word, but I don't have anything to plug yet.
Mike?
You can follow me at Mike Cripe on Twitter, or you can read my work over at The Escapist, where I'm reporting the news mostly and publishing interviews, and hopefully you'll find me on other places very soon. So yeah, please go give me a follow. I'd love to talk to people.
Likewise, find me on Twitter, Damien Lewarden. I write a lot of nonsense on Escapist. Not a lot, some nonsense on Escapist. Yeah, that's it. Cool. So thank you for tuning in, listening, watching us. Hope you enjoyed it. So this time we really spoke a lot about the pop. So next time I want to delve a bit more into the politics side of things. So you all are on notice.
All
Dun,
right.
dun, dun.
Dun, dun.